Thank you. Good evening. I am Councillor Francis Guyver, the Mayor of Crawley, and I welcome you all to this virtual meeting of Crawley Borough Council's full council, and welcome to members of the public and the press watching this meeting live. Before we start, I would like to call for a moment of silence to allow a moment of reflection to honour the 194 Crawley residents who have sadly passed away within the borough as a result of COVID-19, and those who have been affected by the virus. Also, in respect of former councillor David Barry, who died recently, I now call for a moment of silence. Thank you. I will now invite the leaders of each of the two groups to say a few words. Then I will invite Councillors Lanza and then Mullins to say a few words on the sad passing of David Barry. I will not be bringing other members in to speak on these matters. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To lose anyone is a tragedy, and of course amongst those who have died over this last year of the coronavirus includes members of this council itself and former members. I think we need to take some time to reflect upon all of those who have been lost in the town and what it is that we as the local authority need to do to memorialise those lives when the time is right. Certainly the fact that we've lost more people in the town to this virus than were lost during the First World War from this town, I think is something which requires some form of physical remembrance somewhere in our community. But of course, it's not just about the lives lost and the people who have suffered around them. There are many people who are continuing to linger with the symptoms of this. There are many people whose lives have been affected directly by the medical implications, and there are many who's looking at their futures, the future seems a good deal less bright than it did before. We remain one of the hardest hit towns in the country in terms of the economic impact of this, and that is something which we also need to reflect upon, and the actions which moving forward are necessary to get the town back on its feet. So let us remember all the hardship, let us remember those who we have lost, but let us also unite together to ensure that Crawley does recover and that the future ahead of us is brighter than the one which we have lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and certainly I would concur with the words of Councillor Lamb. This last year has been a very difficult one for all of us to varying degrees, but of course for those people who we've lost and for their families there can be nothing worse, and it has been an unimaginable tragedy, one that none of us could have ever have predicted, very sadly. But as the leader has just said, not only have we lost people, around 200 people depending on how it is measured, we also have people who have suffered with ill health, some who continue to suffer the ill health of COVID, and also those people who have had operations delayed and illnesses diagnoses delayed because of the huge pressure that the health service has been under. Yeah, there's been a huge amount of suffering, and of course that's just the health implications. There is of course the economic implications, where Crawley has been particularly badly affected, and it looks like sadly that will continue for some time yet. And I also want to mention that we still have people shielding. So I have a personal friend in this town that lives very close to me, who is still having to shield until the end of this month, despite actually having had COVID in May and being ill, and also despite having been vaccinated some weeks ago as well. So lives are still being impacted, notwithstanding those, of course, of those of us who want to go shopping and things like that. In the scheme of things, that is an inconvenience, but there have been far greater things that have affected people in a much worse way. And of course, there is nothing worse than those who tragically lost their lives. Although I am pleased to see we've had no more deaths in Crawley for around the last 10 days or so from COVID. Long may that continue. I think we have now definitely turned a corner in the vaccination programme, but the impact on COVID and its effect on people's lives is going to continue for some time yet. And we're absolutely right for this council to do everything that we can to help lessen that impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I will now bring in Councillor Lanza to speak on the sad passing of David Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first met David Barry when I was first elected to Crawley Borough Council in May 1988, which seems an awful long time ago now, I have to say. And David was a member of our Crawley Conservative Association and active in the Furnace Green area. And he was a Furnace Green Crawley Borough Council from 1983 to 1991. And just after I joined the council, he became leader of the Conservative group, a position he held from 1988 to 1990. It was a slightly difficult time for us politically. We've been in power for quite a long time, so he met that challenge well and led the group, a smaller group than it is today. I think we were 10 members strong at that point out of 32 Crawley Borough councillors, and did a good job of leading us in opposition and serving his constituents. David was born in 1936 in Brighton, and he lived in a number of different locations, including Horsham, Crawley, of course, Partridge Green, Worthing, and then finally moving to Winslow in Buckinghamshire, his wife Joy. And it was there that he became mayor. He became mayor of Winslow, so he maintained his interest in public life. Outside of community service and public life, he was a very keen cricketer, and he played for Horsham, Goring, and Ifield, and he was also a life member of the Broadbridge Heath Cricket Club. So we're sad at this loss, but grateful for the service that David gave to our community, and clearly to that community in Buckinghamshire as well. And we extend our sympathy and condolences to his family and friends.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Councillor Mullins, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems so sad at the moment that we seem to be having quite a few of these talks or discussions about people who've passed from our council, and it seems to have been quite a rough period, really, one way or another. I remember David Barry very well. We always got on well, actually, when he was in the Conservative Party, even if when he went independent, because we sort of carried a respect for one another, and he always came across as straight talking and honest. I found it hard to find him having a hidden agenda. He seemed to be an open, sort of honest guy who said what he thought and believed in things which were quite important. I think he spent a long time believing that his duty was really to represent the people of Crawley, and his constituents, and he did that to the best of his ability. I just think that he was probably an example of somebody who should be, or we should look to see what it's like to be a councillor, because he was a decent person. And it's so sad when you hear that, of somebody like that who's not with us anymore. It's sad that he went into hospital for whatever reason. I don't know what it was, and he caught COVID while he was in there, and that sort of finished him off. That's an awful thing. So whilst he carried on and he was always dedicated to doing community work in one way or another, he must be remembered in this town as somebody who worked for us for a long time and done a very good job for us, and we need to appreciate that. I know I did respond to his family, and his son Richard came back to me and said, "Thank you so much for getting back to me, and your note about Dad," which was much appreciated. And I know they had great respect for you. Best regards, Richard. And that was, you know, I feel happy that we've managed to respond to the family. Maybe the council should also send a note to Richard from the council and say that we appreciated his good service to this community, and that would be quite a nice thing to do. And may he rest in peace.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins, and thank you everybody for your kind remarks, and we agree that we should send something to the family to thank him for his service over the years. I will now run through the process for this evening's full council meeting. There will be no verbal public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. However, under agenda item 5, public question time, members of the public have had the opportunity to submit written questions in advance, which will be read out during the item and answered by the appropriate councillor. There will be no supplementary questions. For any full council meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via a recorded vote taken by a Democratic Services team member on behalf of myself, the Mayor. The exceptions are approving the minutes of the previous meeting, any other procedural item, or where the item's sole recommendation is for the full council to note the report. On this agenda, that includes recommendation 2, notification of decision protected from call-in. We will also be using group block voting, which means that the group whips will be casting the votes on behalf of their respective parties, namely Councillor Lunnan for the Labour group and Councillor Burrett for the Conservative group. Before each group's block vote is sought, any members from both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, Labour and Conservative groups will be given the chance to vote independently rather than through their group's block vote. So they will have a choice. The only exception of any recommendations which are required by law to be held via a recorded vote, such as setting the council tax and the budget. However, there are no decisions like this tonight. Before I invite each member of the full council to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or are on silent, their backgrounds are appropriate, and that they are aware of their surroundings so that they are not disturbed during the meeting. This includes having TVs, radios and smart speakers turned off. When councillors are invited to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves and pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in the connection. I also remind councillors to consider which councillor is before them alphabetically so they are ready to be sent live. As with all virtual meetings, we will now take agenda items 1, apologies for absence, 2, disclosures of interest, and 3 minutes together. I will now ask the Democratic Services Manager supporting the meeting tonight to invite on my behalf each member of the council to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Chris Pedlow, the Democratic Services Manager. For record purposes, we have Peter Nicholson, the Council's independent person, the Chief Executive, and a number of other officers are on this meeting. We'll now proceed with the record of attendance and the minutes. Firstly, starting with Councillor Ashcroft. Can you please confirm your name, the ward you live in, if you have any declarations, and that you're and about the minutes on the 24th of February? Councillor Ashcroft.
Good evening, Councillor Liam Ascoff, Gossips Green and North East Broadfield. I have no declaration of interest and I agree with the minutes of the meeting, of the previous meeting.
Councillor Ayling.
Hello, I'm Councillor Ayling. I am the ward member for Bewbush and Broadfield North. I have no declaration of interest and I agree the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Belbin.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Andrew Belbin representing Pound Hill South and Worth. I have no declarations of interest to make and I agree the minutes of the 24th of February full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tina Belbin.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Tina Belbin representing Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest to make and I agree the minutes of the full council held on February the 24th.
Thank you. Councillor Brenda Burgess.
Good evening, I'm Brenda Burgess, a ward member for Three Bridges and Town Centre. I've read the minutes and I agree them. I do have a personal declaration for page 68 as a borough councillor, and that's for the air quality management area proposed extension, and also a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council. Thank you.
Councillor Bob Burgess.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Bob Burgess, ward member for Three Bridges and the Town Centre. I approve the minutes of the meeting. I have a personal disclosure of interest in the item on the air quality management area as it is in my ward. Thank you.
Councillor Richard Barrett.
Excuse me. Thank you. I'm Richard Barrett, Ward Councillor for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood Ward. I have no declarations of interest to add to the ones that are already listed on the order paper, which I sent in earlier in the week, and I agree the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 24th of February. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan Crewe. You're on mute, Councillor Crewe. You're on mute.
Very unlike me to do that. My apologies. Good evening. I'm Councillor Duncan Crowe, member for Furness Green. I have no declarations of interest to declare, and I agree the minutes of the last full council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Eade.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Carol Eade. I represent Furness Green Ward. I have no declarations of interest, and I agree the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Fiveash.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Rory Fiveash, member for Bewbush and North Broadfield. No declarations and I agree the minutes of the 24th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flack.
Hello, I'm Councillor Flack, representing Southgate. I have a personal non-prejudicial disclosure of interest in the air quality management area item, and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Guidera.
Thank you. I am Councillor Francis Guidera, a ward member for Tilgate. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the previous meeting.
Councillor Hart.
Good evening, I'm Julie Hart, ward member for Ifield and Ifield West. I have no disclosures of interest and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Irvine.
Yes, good evening, Councillor Ian Irvine representing Broadfield. I have no declaration of interest to make and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Jaggard.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Kim Jaggard from Maidenbough Ward. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the 24th of February.
Thank you. Councillor Johans.
Good evening, Councillor Gorinda Johns representing Northgate and West Green. I have a personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to the proposed extension of the air quality management area on page 68, as I live on one of the roads which will be covered by the proposed extension, and I agree the minutes of the last full council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
I'm Councillor Michael Jones. I'm member for Beebush and Broadfield North. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I agree the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Councillor Peter Lamb. I'm the representative, or one of the representatives, for Northgate and West Green Ward. I have a personal non-prejudiced interest to declare in relation to the AQMA, and I am happy to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you. Councillor Bob Lanza, Pound Hill South and Worth Ward. I agree the minutes of the previous meeting, and I have no additional declarations of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lunnon.
Good evening, I'm Tim Lunham, Councillor for Broadfield Ward. I have no declarations of interest and I approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Malik.
Good evening. Good evening, I'm Councillor Shehzad Malik from Langley Green and Tashmore Ward. I do not have any disclosure of interest to make, and I approve the minutes of the last full council meeting held on the 24th of February 2021. Thank you.
Councillor McElhaney.
Tom McElhaney, Langley Green and Tushmore. No disclosures. I agree the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Hi, good evening. I'm Councillor Kevin McCarthy. I represent the ward of Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the last full council meeting held on the 24th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller-Smith.
Good evening, Councillor Jennifer Miller-Smith, one of the representatives of Maidenbower Ward. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the meeting of the 24th of February.
Thank you. Councillor Mullins.
Councillor Mullins here. I agree the minutes of the last meeting of the 24th. I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Magali.
Good evening, Maureen Magali, representing Tilgate Ward. I have no declarations of interest to make and I approve the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 24th of February 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peck.
A very good evening. I am Councillor Peck and I represent Maidenbower Ward. I have no declarations of interest to be made and I approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of February.
Thank you. Councillor Penlington. You're on mute, Councillor Penlington.
Apologies, everybody. I'm Councillor Pendlington from Pound Hill South and Worth. I have no disclosures of interest to make and I'm happy to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of February.
Thank you. Councillor Pickett.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Michael Pickett, one of the three councillors for Southgate Ward. I have no declarations to make and I approve the minutes of the full council on Wednesday the 24th of February 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Good evening. Jonathan Purdy representing Three Bridges and the town centre. I have a personal non-prejudicial interest to declare in respect of the AQMA on page 68. Firstly, I am a ward councillor for that ward. And secondly, my normal place of work is within the AQMA. I approve the minutes of the council meeting held on February 24th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rana, are you on the call? Can I ask Councillor Rana? Don't believe she is, so we'll come back. Give us a chance. I'll try to dial her in as well. So we'll go to Councillor Brenda Smith.
Hello, I'm Councillor Brenda Smith. I represent Langley Green Ward. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the council meeting on the 24th of February.
Councillor Peter Smith.
And finally, good evening everybody. Peter Smith representing Ifield and Ifield West. I have no further disclosures of interest to make
and I agree the minutes of the meeting of the 24th of February 2021.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Sudan.
Yes, I'm the final one, aren't I? Councillor Karen Sudan, representing Northgate and West Green Ward. I have no further declarations of interest to make, and I approve the minutes from the 24th of February.
Thank you. So, Chair, Councillor had a message. Councillor on is trying to dial in, so she apologies for being late. So we'll continue. She's not here at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. The full council has agreed the minutes of the meeting of the full council held on the 24th of February 2021 are an accurate record. On to item 4, my communications. I have 2 items. Excuse me. Don't normally have a problem talking, I know. I have 2 items of communication. The first one, I was really pleased to be able to join with Crawley and Horsham Armed Forces Veterans Breakfast Club for a virtual meeting. That was hosted by obviously the Veterans Breakfast Club in Crawley, and we were joined by a guest speaker, Derek Hardman, who is the founder of the Armed Forces Veterans Breakfast Club. It was really interesting to listen to what he had to say, and they are doing some really fabulous grassroots work with veterans in the area, supporting them with all of their needs in terms of, you know, housing and moral support and camaraderie and mental health. So, you know, long may they continue. They're growing quickly, and they're a fabulous organisation. So thank you for that invitation. The next item is quite a profound one for me. This will be my last meeting as a borough councillor. I will be stepping down in the coming days, and 2 of my Conservative colleagues will then immediately call for a by-election to be held at the same time as the upcoming election in May. I'm sure this news is a surprise to some, but for those who know me personally, it won't be a total surprise. I must first thank the residents of Tilgate for their support over the past 6 years, for not only electing me, but more importantly for me, re-electing me. That was the vote of confidence. It has been a huge honour to represent you all in Tilgate, and a lot of work too. But I love my role, and if I could continue, believe me, I would. Sadly, I think that 5,000 miles distance between the USA and Tilgate might prove too much even for me. And these councillor roles do not belong to us. It's a vocation. We represent with the consent of our electors, and it is now someone else's turn. I would like to thank my colleagues on both sides of the political divide. For the public, it might appear that we can't stand each other, but most of us get along really well, and that's how it should be. This past year has shown how well things can work when we operate only in the interest of the town, putting aside the party politics. After the election, I hope those of you who are re-elected can return to this way of working in a collegial way, and long may it continue into the future. I would like to thank Crawley Council's officers, or as the public might call you, the council staff. Past and present, you have been so helpful, and you are the unsung heroes of the council, particularly during these difficult past 12 months. I would like to thank my great friend Henry Smith, our MP, for convincing me to run for election back in 2015, and for the support and friendship he has provided ever since. Whilst I don't like to single out anyone in our group, I would like to thank former council leader Bob Lanza for being a great friend and for his calm and measured advice over the past 6 years. I wish my successor the very best, and I hope they are ready to work as hard as I have. Tilgate's residents now have a standard which Councillor Maureen Morgali is fully on board with. They will expect no less, and have proven that they are more than happy to kick out anybody who they feel is not up to the task, no matter how important that person might feel that they are. I would lastly, but for me, most importantly, like to thank my family, my mum, my recently passed dad, God rest his soul, and for their love, help and support. My wife, Andrea, and my stepsons, Alex and Sean, who have all helped and supported me. And Juliana, my beloved daughter, who over the years has expressed a wish for me to stop being an elected person because she wants her dad back. Well, Juliana, no more leafleting, no more canvassing, no more embarrassing 4-foot signs on the roof of the car. No more evening meetings, just family. And Facebook. I'm not giving up Facebook. Thank you all, and let's keep fighting for Crawley.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I know this has been a difficult statement for you to make, and I know that we will still be doing the annual council meeting as normal and doing our vote of thanks for the Mayor at that meeting, but it does feel appropriate that I do comment at this time now, and I'm pleased that the leader is also indicating to speak. This year has indeed been a very difficult one for us all, and I thank you for your time as Mayor in these very difficult circumstances. You were not dealt a good hand. It has helped to be Mayor given the lockdowns that we have had, but you really have made the best of it and done what you can for this town. And of course, it's not just the time that you've been as Mayor, it's been the time that you've been as a councillor. And I'm going to miss you as not only as a member of my group, but also as a colleague in Tilgate, where I am the county councillor. It is, it is going to seem very strange without you. I think that is quite a reasonable thing to say. But on behalf of my entire group, we do, of course, wish you all the best. We may well be hoping to come out to visit you at some point, if indeed we're able to do that in the not too distant future. And also, I personally commend you because you're not going for a little while yet, but you are doing the right thing to enable a by-election to be held at the same time as the scheduled elections, as to order to not create an additional cost for the local authority and for local taxpayers. You're not going for a few weeks yet, but you have done the right thing in avoiding that unnecessary cost, and indeed a later by-election in Tilgate, and that costs an inconvenience for the council. So I will enjoy referring to you as Mr. Mayor while I can during the rest of this meeting, and obviously we hope that you're able to dial in for the annual council meeting where we can do the proper vote of thanks for the Mayor. But I just wanted to say at this opportunity, thank you for everything that you have done for your ward, for your town, and for this council. You will be very sadly missed. Thank you.
Councillor Peter Lamb.
Thank you. I have to say, it comes as a complete surprise to me to hear this news. But what I would say certainly is that I've always, on a personal level, got on well with you, Mr. Mayor. And it'll be a shame that we can't have a beer after the election again. Well, maybe we can at this rate. Who knows? I don't know when you're going yet. But it has been very clear that you have been one of the most active councillors during your time on the council. Certainly, there seems to be almost a cult of personality to some extent on Facebook in support of your efforts there. And whatever you get up to next, I really genuinely wish you all the best of luck with that. I think we'll be taking that from both sides of the council, wherever you head off to. So no doubt we'll have more time to reflect on this at the annual council meeting, but just, sorry to see you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, everybody. Obviously, it's a difficult thing to resign, but it's the right thing to do. I won't blubber this time. I've done that before at previous meetings over much sadder things. So I will now move to item 5.
Sorry, Chair. I believe Councillor Rana is in the meeting now. So, Councillor Rana, can we just do your declarations?
Sure.
Councillor Rana, can you please, can I just check? Can you introduce yourself and confirm you have the declarations?
Thank you, Chris. Sorry about that. I thought it was Tuesday today. And I'm Councillor Tahira Rana from Broadfield, and I have no declarations of interest to declare. And I think and the last minutes of a correct meeting, the correct whatever. The minutes were correct of the last meeting. And Francis, Mayor, I mean, I just heard about, I mean, you're resigning. I'm very, oh dear, I feel a bit sad hearing about it because you've been such a great friend whenever I meet you. So lovely to speak to you. I'm sure I'll see you around. I really would be sad to see you go, but oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. On to item 5, public questions. Next item is public question time, and we have 30 minutes set aside for the item. As we are unable to take verbal public questions, we now accept written public questions in advance. However, we've not received any public questions in advance. Therefore, we will move to the next item. Item 6, consideration of full council recommendations and call-in decisions. There are 2 recommendations before the council, and we will begin with recommendation 1, future format of council meetings arising from the Governance Committee 15th of March 2021. This was published in a supplementary agenda as the meeting only took place the day before the full council's agenda was published. Councillor Burrett, as Chair of Governance Committee, please introduce the recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I introduce recommendation 1, which is contained on page 7 of the supplemental agenda? This relates to a discussion we had at the Governance Committee regarding the future format of council meetings. Obviously, for the last year, we've been holding all our meetings virtually, and there was a request from the Overview and Scrutiny Commission as part of the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel report that we should look at what we do in the future in terms of when we are able to do in-person meetings, which meetings should be in person, which should be virtual, which hybrid, which is basically where members can attend in person, but others can attend virtually on a screen. Hybrid meetings won't be possible until we move into the new town hall because of the cost of trying to put the required technology into the old committee rooms, which obviously is not a particularly good use of money when we're going to be knocking the old building down. But of course, our new town hall will have hybrid meetings. Once we move in next year, those will be possible. So just to take you through parts of the recommendation, part 1, the feeling of the committee was that in principle and where possible, all formal meetings of the council, i.e. full council and main committees, should be held in person. With regard to informal meetings, that's meetings that are not open to the public, working groups, cabinet briefing meetings, individual cabinet member portfolio briefings, those should all be digitally enabled. And by that, what that means is they should be able to take place virtually, but it should be up to the participants to decide which first. For example, an individual cabinet member having briefing officers to decide whether they want that to be person. But all those meetings should be capable of being held. Part 2, depending on legislation that comes into force, this year's annual meeting on the 28th of May should be held virtually, because at that stage we won't know. We don't know at this stage, obviously, how far the vaccination programme will have moved by then. This caveat to that is that at the moment, the current regulations which enable virtual meetings expire on the 7th of May, and the government haven't renewed those. If they don't renew them, it will have to be an in-person meeting. But this is saying that if those regulations are renewed, then we will have a virtual annual meeting this year. Part 3 is simply a procedural matter, basically saying that if virtual meetings cannot continue with an extension of the legislation, then we will revert back to in-person meetings, and the relevant procedure rules we've used for the last year will be suspended, but there will be the ability to reinstate them straight away should it become necessary to do so. And finally, if legislation does come into force to allow virtual meetings, the monitoring office, consultation with 2 group leaders, the chair and vice chair of government, be given authority to amend the constitution to reflect the committee's wishes, which is that the next cycle, i.e. the cycle between the elections and summer recess, should be held virtually, and then a decision would be taken at the Governance Committee meeting in June as to what would then happen for the next cycle in September. So that's the recommendation of the committee, and I'm happy to propose that and obviously listen to any comments that members have to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Llewellyn, I believe you are seconding.
Yes, I am. Yes,
Thank you.
I formally second. And can I speak now?
Of course.
Thank you. I'm fully in agreement with everything Councillor Barrett has said. I think the one caveat that hopefully this experience has taught us is that maybe in future, when we've got the new town hall and technology to enable it, we should be able to look at having hybrid meetings. So of course, people can attend from home and still take full part into it, and also including members of the public. And the reason that's important is that, of course, it might seem nice and easy to a lot of us to get to the town hall at 7:30 on a Wednesday evening and take part in these discussions. But of course, some people have disabilities. Some people, you know, live in Crawley but work outside of the town, and really a good councillor is a councillor that's open to as many people as possible and as many people taking part in democracy as possible. So by hopefully in future combining both in-person meetings, which I think the majority of our members agree sort of are the best way of doing it, but combining that with the ability to have an online element really is hopefully the future, and we've shown we can make it work. So hopefully in the longer term we will be able to do that, but for the time being, the Labour Group are supporting recommendation 1.
Thank you, Councillor Lunnan. Are there any speakers? Councillor Crowe?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Conservative Group will be supporting all of recommendation 1. Personally, I wasn't totally happy that this came to governance at this time, although it was a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, and they are obviously entitled to do as they see fit. But my concern with it was that this was conflating 2 issues. One, the longer term learning, if you like, and what we should do in terms of ways and means of hosting meetings, which I think is a perfectly legitimate discussion to have, although personally I think we should be holding it a little bit later. And of course what we're going to be doing in the here and now, with the added complication that the government have not yet, and I very much hope that they do, extend the legislation that enables councils to have formal meetings virtually. As things stand, that is not enabled, and we will be in theory going back to meeting in person after the 7th of May. But I hope that the government, I appreciate, the government have got an awful lot on their plate. No one would dispute that, and council meetings may not be, would clearly not be top of the agenda at this time, but we do need the government to come through for us to enable councils up and down the country, particularly those of us who have elections where we have our annual meetings coming up in May, to be able to hold those annual meetings in a COVID safe way, in which all members are included and feel comfortable. But if the government do come through for us, we have agreement from both parties on the council that we will look at this on a cycle by cycle basis, and that's for up to and including the July full council meeting. That meeting should indeed be held virtually, and I would very much hope that after that and after the summer recess, if conditions allow, that we could meet in person, because I think it's right in principle, and that's what this recommendation states. But if we're not able to, then we need to look at this on a cycle by cycle basis and decide whether to meet virtually or indeed in person. But for now, we're left a little bit in limbo until we get further guidance. And obviously, if that legislation is not extended or indeed new legislation comes forward, we will, and we've had some very initial discussions, we will need to have some discussions amongst the groups as to what we should do for those, certainly for the annual council meeting, where some members may not feel comfortable, they may not have been vaccinated, or they may be clinically vulnerable, as to a pairing arrangement that we might be able to do to facilitate that meeting in a good and safe way where everyone can feel safe. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the recommendation along with the Conservative group, and we look forward to having informal meetings at the request of those who are holding and hosting those meetings to be their decision. I think that's right, that is enabled, and going forward with formal meetings in person as and when we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Councillor Mullins, please.
Thank you, Mayor. When I read this and understood it, I thought, well, you know, Chris, you are a bit old-fashioned because you actually like meeting people and associating with people, getting to know people, and all of that from these video performances is missing, really. You can't bump into somebody in the toilet and have a side discussion or anything, or sit around a coffee machine and talk about things. And there's so much missing from our normal interactive activity that we share together from these virtual meetings. But they have been very necessary, and I do understand that. And I'm not a person that wants to run away from new technology, and fully understand that once you introduce technology, it doesn't go away again. It stays there. But I don't think recommendation 1 sets everything in concrete. So I would support it absolutely, but I still think it leaves the door open for us to do what we want at the end of the day. And as a council, we can make our decisions as we go into the future. There might well be a case for hybrid type meetings where some individuals who maybe not feeling too well but could cope over the internet with a meeting could then participate, and that input would not be lost to that meeting. So there are elements of it that are quite important. So we can support it, but I don't see it as poured in concrete. It gives us options into the future, and I think that's quite important. And can I say to you, Mayor, I'm shocked at your news tonight. I'm pleased for you because I think you've been talking to yourself and your family about this for a long time, and I wish you bon voyage and good success in America.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. It has been, 3 years of this, and our boys have got special needs. It'll be nice to reunite our family finally. So thank you for your kind words. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to precede my own remarks with my own good wishes to you and your family on this new adventure, as it were, endeavour. And on to the Governance Committee recommendation. I think what we have in recommendation is quite a balanced position. It tries to cover all the bases. It tries to cover the eventuality of renewed legislation enabling virtual meetings, and it tries to cover the eventuality of that not happening. And I just make the comment, despite what some government ministers say, we really don't know what's going to happen until it's happened. That's my experience of recent times. I'll just make the point that even pre-COVID, in Wales, via the devolved administration, virtual meetings were already possible. So anything can happen if you follow the example of one of the devolved nations. We're sociable creatures. We miss each other, surely. But there's more to it than that, as I think Councillor Lunn mentioned. It's about access to democracy in the context of formal meetings. People seeing elected members and officers working on their behalf, even if they might sometimes disagree with what we're doing. Having the ability to be present and to witness the gravitas of the debate on important issues. I think that's key to our democracy. At the same time, so there is that expectation, I think, in the public, but there's a second expectation. We all have climate change strategies right now, and we all have beliefs around reducing energy consumption, not making unnecessary journeys. So I think this second expectation around us setting an example, even in a tight borough boundary, of not making unnecessary journeys for informal meetings. Now, I moved an amendment, and it's tabled here, to recommendation 1, part 1, to say basically formal meetings should in principle be in person and informal ones should be digitally enabled. And the choice of words was careful. It was designed to allow a degree of optionality such that the participants in the meeting could decide on the circumstances, which of them would attend in person or which of them would attend virtually, or indeed if it should be entirely personal, in person, or entirely virtual. So there's a degree of flexibility in there deliberately. And I think I would request that kind of definition be recorded in the minutes, because it's all about affording attendees at a meeting a degree of flexibility as to how they want to hold that meeting given their individual circumstances and the situation at the time. I think Councillor Mullins really made that point as well, that we're not setting anything in stone, but I would express the hope that we as elected members look for reasonable opportunities to attend meetings virtually and to set the kind of example that I referred to earlier where that's appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor McAlaney, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that obviously it's worthwhile opening up our democratic meetings to as many people as possible. But at the same time, I think everybody in this meeting needs to be aware, at best, there are 8 people attending, watching these meetings, most of which are probably council officers. I mean, there is a reason people don't bother to engage with democracy. We're not going to solve that with just this alone opening up the possibility for people to attend. I want to put this to a vote now, please.
Thank you, Councillor McAlaney. No further speakers? As there are no further speakers, Councillor Burrett, please formally move the adoption of recommendation 1, and in doing so, you can use your right to reply.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I formally move recommendation 1, and I thank all those members who've spoken for their comments. I mean, you know, as members have said, the last year has been very strange, and there have been all sorts of things that have happened that one wouldn't expect. And one of those is the fact that I completely agree with what Councillor Mullins said tonight. And it's not often that Councillor Mullins and I totally agree with each other, but I do concur with his comments. My personal preference as an individual is for in-person meetings, and I think it's very important that we go back to that for public meetings so that the public can see us in action, particularly those that normally have a large attendance, like planning and sometimes licensing if there's a continuous application. But equally, I would concur with Councillor Lanza in terms of individual briefings, that where there is the opportunity to do that virtually and it works for those participants, we should do that. And of course, there may be some members who have individual briefings, who work during the day, who need a briefing with officers and can actually have a virtual briefing in their lunch hour or whatever, which they wouldn't be able to have in person had they had to go to the town hall. So I think it's going to be very much horses for courses. And as members have said, you know, this does leave it open to lots of members to actually, you know, determine what happens in the future, depending on circumstances. So with that, I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Burrett. We will now hold the vote on recommendation 1, future format of council meetings, from the Governance Committee held on the 15th of March 2021. Will the Democratic Services Manager please conduct the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, please can I check that if any members wish to vote outside of the block who are members of the Labour or Conservative groups? If you do want to vote as an individual, please turn your cameras on now. Councillor Pickett, are you intending to vote as an individual?
No, that was just a mistake. I'll turn it off now, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify. With that being said, there's no other indications. We will go to the block vote. So Councillor Lunnan, please provide the 15 Labour block votes.
Thank you. The 15 Labour block votes are in favour of recommendation 1.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, please provide the 17 Conservative block votes.
The 17 Conservative block votes are in favour of recommendation 1.
Thank you. Councillor Fiveash, please cast your vote.
Yeah, I vote for this.
Sorry, bear with me a second. Let's try again. Councillor Fiveash, please.
Yeah, sure. I vote for this. For.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And finally, Councillor Sedan, you vote please.
For.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, that was unanimous. The recommendation is passed.
Thank you. Therefore, recommendation 1 is agreed. Item 7, recommendation 2, notification of decision protected from call-in. We will now consider recommendation 2, notification of decision protected from call-in. As you'll see from page 3 of the agenda, the Chief Executive on the 10th of March 2021 used her protection from call-in authority in relation to a decision taken by the leader of the council in respect of Crawley Town Investment Plan, heads of terms. In line with the council's constitutional use of her protection from call-in must be reported to the full council. The reasons for the protection was the deadline for the Chief Executive to submit the heads of terms back to the government by 5 p.m. today, and she has confirmed that that has been submitted. Does any member wish to speak on this matter? Otherwise, I'll move the recommendation. Councillor Malik, Deputy Mayor, will you second, please?
Yes, I formally second the motion.
Thank you. As this is a procedural matter, no recorded vote is required. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. On to item 8, notice of motion, Crawley's People's Future. We will now deal with the notice of motion before us this evening, which is set out on page 77 of the agenda, notice of motion, Crawley's People's Future. This motion will be moved by Councillor Sedan and seconded by Councillor Fivash. I therefore call upon Councillor Sedan to formally move the motion and present the motion. Councillor Sedan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, when I look back over my time as an elected member, which may be coming to an end soon, it's often occurred to me that it's been a tale of two towns. There is our town in which we live, in which many of us work and struggle to live and work, and there is the town that people come into to work and enjoy, but go home afterwards to enjoy a better standard of living than the standard of living enjoyed by Crawley people. Crawley has prospered over the years. Everyone says so. Only this week, the leader of this council has remarked in a celebratory way that over the time since he's been leader up until last March and the onset of the pandemic, Crawley's economy had grown by a quarter. No doubt Crawley has brought prosperity for some. Both Virgin and British Airways have made healthy profits, and Gatwick itself has done very well out of Crawley. But we have a duty to pause and consider just how things have been for Crawley people during this period of so-called prosperity. For many of the people whose town this is, prosperity has no meaning. They aspire just to get by. This is in huge contrast with those who come here to work, who earn good salaries and live outside the town or invest here because it is good for business. The prosperity that has been enjoyed by some has been earned at the expense of the ordinary or extraordinary people of Crawley, those who work for low pay in insecure jobs. I've met hard-working people who do 2 or 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. This has become a common thing. We have record numbers of people falling through the cracks and becoming homeless. The pressures on people's lives have resulted in the high and rising numbers of people suffering from mental ill health. Much of the difficulties experienced by Crawley people are caused by or seriously exacerbated by the high housing costs that are a result of the economic growth that we are so pleased about and want to return to. And when it comes to physical ill health, we are among the least healthy in the county. Much of this poor health can be attributed to poverty and poor air quality, both of which are a downside of the economic prosperity enjoyed by Crawley. Mr. Mayor, this is not a happy past that we should celebrate. We should not be ambitious for a return to this state of affairs. No doubt it is a better state of affairs than the way things are now due to the pandemic. But please don't let's talk about before the pandemic. as though everything was wonderful back then. What we did have before the pandemic that mitigated things at least a bit were the public services provided by this council. Among other things, this council provided vital support for voluntary organisations and groups that gave people a better quality of life, play and leisure facilities that people could afford and that would help them to live healthier lives. Cutting back on these things is wrong, and I do not believe there was no alternative. I believe that had this council had different priorities, viewed things differently from the outset, exercised a determination to keep our residents' safety and well-being uppermost, and been less complacent about the positive effects of economic growth, we would have been able to secure better outcomes for all. I know that individually, most of us do care passionately for Crawley people, and that there is a huge willingness to do right by them. What I think is lacking is a collective resolve to view things differently. Without that collective resolve, the constant asking ourselves and challenging one another with the question, what difference will this make to our residents' lives? Our collective knowledge and understanding of our town is wasted. Mr. Mayor and colleagues, this resolution is about resolving collectively to recalibrate our priorities going forward, to redress the balance away from business and in favour of the people of our town. I urge colleagues to support the resolution in full. I'm surprised that the Conservative group have proposed an amendment that takes out the call for greater involvement of elected representatives. It was Councillor Crowe and his group who loudly lamented the lack of consultation at the start of the pandemic. It was also his group that criticised the leader of the then controlling group for refusing to meet the people who ran the shops at Tilgate Parade to discuss the effects of rent rises. Perhaps Councillor Crowe is confident that his group will continue to run the council after May, and that this part of the resolution will be academic. I hope this resolution will be passed in full. However, should the amendment be incorporated, I will still vote for it, because I believe that the people of this town need and deserve us to make this promise to them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sedan. Councillor Fiveash, please second the motion and confirm if you are wishing to reserve your right to speak later during the debate. Councillor Fiveash.
I formally second the motion and I will speak later on, if that's okay. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine. We have a proposed amendment on this recommendation as detailed on page 13 of the supplementary agenda. Councillor Crowe, please introduce your amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And firstly, just to clarify, a number of inaccuracies were just stated, and I have never made any public comment about Councillor Lamb and shop rents. I formally propose my amendment, which makes the motion more succinct and to the point, and which broadens the consultation to involve individual members of the public. Thank you.
Councillor McCarthy, I believe you are seconding.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And well, may I take the opportunity to give my best wishes for you and the rest of your family whilst you follow the American dream. Good luck, mate.
Thank you very much.
I would like to formally second the amendment to the notice of motion from Councillor Crowe. I have no additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm intending to hold one discussion on this item, so I will open up the floor. Are there any speakers on the recommendation or the proposed amendment? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yes, I'd like to move a procedural motion that the motion now be put.
I'd like to formally second that. No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. That's duly noted. Thank you. Bear with us.
Can I go? With the, we'll now have to vote on the procedural motion. So with that in mind, we'll vote on the procedural motion. Firstly, as there's a procedural motion, I'll give the groups I will let the two group whips indicate whether they're going to vote for the procedural motion or not before we start the vote. Councillor Lunnan, do you want to address your group?
Yeah, we'll be voting in favour of the procedural motion, members of the Labour group.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett?
Yes, we will be doing the same.
Okay, with that being said, we will now start the vote on the procedural motion. Councillor Lunnan, would you please, apologies, would any member of either the Labour group or the Conservative group wish to vote as an individual rather than on the procedural motion? Just for clarification, does any member of either the Conservative group or excuse me, the procedural motion to go straight to the vote want to vote as an individual, or are they going to vote as within the group? Councillor Pickett, your camera is on. Can I just clarify, please, for openness? His camera is up. Okay.
So I'll be abstaining from the vote.
Okay, so I will ask you as an individual then if you're abstaining, so you're not voting with the group. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That being said, we are voting on the procedural matter of going straight to the vote. Councillor Lunnan, will you provide the group vote of the Labour Party or Labour group on the procedural matter?
Yep, as far as I understand it, I'm providing 14 votes in favour of the procedural motion to go straight to the vote.
Yes, that is correct. Councillor Barrett, will you, on the procedural matter, can you provide the 17 block votes for Labour? Conservative.
Yes.
Conservative.
Yes. The 17 block votes from the Conservative group on the procedural motion are in favour of the procedural motion.
Councillor Mullins, your block.
Yes, please. Yes, please. I just trying to get my head around the procedure at the moment. If there's an amendment to a motion, we have to debate and take a decision on the amendment, and then, given the result of that vote on the amendment, have to vote for the final motion in that order. And I don't quite understand what we're doing at the moment.
Okay, I will provide some clarity.
I'm confused.
Okay. Councillor, please bear with. I will try to explain, and apologies if we've gone too fast. Councillor Lamb has made a procedural motion to end the discussion and to go straight to the vote on the amendment, then on to the vote on to the substantive vote after the amendment. That being said, the debate would end. The right to reply would be a verbal right to reply, and we'd go straight to the vote. With that being said, as Councillor Mullins has been unsure what the vote is, I will restart the vote again. Councillor Mullins, does that clarify what the vote is on this vote?
Yes, thank you very much.
And apologies if it was not made clear. We will start this vote on the procedural motion again. Councillor Pickett, I'm taking you are still voting as an individual, not within the group whip.
That's correct.
Thank you. That being said, I will ask Councillor Lunnan to repeat or restart the vote and tell me what the Labour group vote is on the procedural motion. And it's your 14 votes.
Yeah, the Labour group is still in favour of the procedural motion.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, on the procedural motion, your 17 Conservative votes.
In favour of the procedural motion.
Okay. Councillor Fiveash, can you please vote on the procedural motion if tabled?
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I'll vote against the procedural motion.
Thank you. Councillor Pickett?
I'm abstaining on the vote.
Thank you. And Councillor Sudan?
Against.
Mr. Mayor, the procedural motion is carried 31 votes to 1 abstention and 2 against. Therefore, we go straight to the vote, which means the right to reply. Councillor will now vote on the amendment, and then there'll be so we'll go straight to the vote on the amendment. If you may, let me just
I understand. So we're bypassing all debate on this and going straight to the vote on the amendment, proposed amendment, and that's where we're at this point.
Thank you.
Please hold that vote then.
Okay. And apologies if this has been confusing. We will now go to the vote on the amendment, as the Mayor has just said. Councillor Lunnan, would you please? Oh, sorry. I will come back on screen just to clarify. Would any members of either of the two groups wish to vote as an individual on the amendment moved by Councillor Crowe?
Yes, Pickett.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pickett. That being said, any other furthers? No, we'll go to the block vote. Councillor Lunnan, can you please vote on the amendment tabled by Councillor Crowe on the notice of motion?
The 14 Labour block votes were against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, your 17 block votes on the amendment?
Of 17 block votes, I'm in favour of the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Fiveash, your vote on the amendment?
Yep, I vote
sorry.
again.
Oh, let me get you on screen. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Pickett, your vote on the amendment?
Abstain. Yeah, I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Sedan?
Against.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, the amendment is carried by 17 votes to 1 abstention and 14 votes. Sorry, 16 votes for. Was that correct? I'm just trying to check. Bear with me 1 second. I want to just check that. So that is correct. Yeah, the amendment is carried by 17 votes, 1 abstention and 16 against. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, just briefly, we will now, subject to your approval, go to the substantive vote on the notice of motion as amended.
Thank you very much. Please do proceed with that vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Finally, we will, as I've just stated, we will just check, does any individual member from the Labour or Conservative vote wish to vote as an individual? Councillor Pickett, again, do you want to vote as an individual?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool, thank you. Are there any other members who want to vote as an individual on the substantive notice of motion as amended? No, that being said, I will move to the vote using the block vote. Councillor Lunnan, your vote on the amended notice of motion. Or 14.
For the amended motion.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett for the notice of motion as amended.
17 votes for the amended motion.
Thank you. Councillor Fiveash for the amended notice of motion. Bear with me, let me get you live. Sorry.
Sure.
I just want to make sure it's live. There you are. Your vote, please.
Yeah, I vote for the amended motion.
Thank you. Councillor Pickett?
I abstain.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Sedan?
For.
Okay. Chair, the amended notice of motion of the is carried by 33 votes, no votes against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the notice of motion, Crawley's People's Future amended, is agreed. Item 9. The next item is Councillors' questions time, and we have 30 minutes for this redesigned item. We will start with noting the set of written questions submitted by Councillor Fiveash and Councillor Bob Burgess, as detailed in the supplementary agenda, which includes the responses from the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lamb, and from the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, Councillor Mullins. Before I start the verbal questioning element, I want to remind all members, both those asking and those responding to the questions, please be succinct. Also, this is Councillors' question time, so please refrain from making statements. Councillor Fiveash, do you wish to ask a supplementary question or ask a further question?
Yes, I would actually.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you said about not making statements, but I feel with the answer that I've been given by Councillor Lamb, I feel that I would like to state for the officers of the council that I haven't sneered at them. I believe they've done a wonderful job over the course of the pandemic and in general. My question was about, his comments about ending the pandemic and what work the council has done to do that. And I can see from Councillor Lamb's response that I assumed that we all knew what a pandemic was, and clearly that's not the case. But sorry, that's not actually a question, it's a statement.
Do you have a question?
Do you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll forget.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor Fivash. Sorry, the click doesn't work all the time. Councillor Bob Burgess, do you wish to ask a supplementary question or ask a further question?
Yes, indeed, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank people for the answers to the questions that were submitted. Supplementary question is this. The total cost of the tank pitch, both installation and current maintenance, is 5,315, and this figure over time is going to rise. And at this time of severe financial pressures on councils, not only associated with COVID-19, how can the Cabinet member justify the continued outlay, especially as there are no figures concerning usage of the pitch? Thank you.
Councillor Mullins.
Thank you, Mayor. Do you know, I'm really surprised at Bob.
Councillor Mullins, your camera.
My camera should be on.
Okay, can I ask that? Thank you. You've just come. Sorry, there's been a delay in putting you across.
Oh, I see. Okay, beg your pardon.
There you are, please.
Right. Can I say I was very surprised to see this question from Bob, because before we built the tank court, there was an awful lot of debate about it, and it was quite slow progress getting there. And we didn't actually get there and really until the late autumn of 18, which sort of wasn't the greatest time to open, and it ran it into the winter season. And now we've ended up in this year of COVID, and it just hasn't been possible to do very much with it in terms of what we wanted to do. I had some great ideas about working with the mayor and some charity events. That was Raj Sharma. I did speak to Francis as well about the possibility of using it to run some mayor events. In that we could have involved the Raj Club for some curries, and perhaps what used to be the Labour Club, it's not anymore by the way, it's got a new name now, for some beers or something, and we could have had a great charity day out there as one of the events. But we've been through a period where it hasn't really been practical to develop the interest in it and to publicise it, and that's been a bit sad in that way. It just got caught in the wrong period of time, frankly. But look, when we're talking about something that's a minority activity, I accept it is, so are a lot of other things that we do. If we really went down Bob's road of following his creed on justification, we wouldn't have the running track, for example, at K2. It's, you know, it's great gaps in its usage until events occur. We wouldn't have a lot of the football fields that we got that lay vacant for a lot of the time, but when they are used, they're of great need of the people that are using them. We have huts at Tilgate that of a minority interest. People in there are small groups of people. We run those huts to serve their interests and their needs. Our town has always developed activities for the minorities, and we've had loads of discussions in the past about croquet, about hockey, about netball. We tried to suit the needs of everybody when we can, and that's what we do in this town. Now, these costs that Bob's referring to are actually very low costs in a town like ours, and whatever way you try and cut it, they're not going to break the bank. And in fact, when you look at the £200 a year estimated for maintenance, well, if those workers weren't doing a bit of work on that, we'd still be paying them to do something else somewhere else. It's not really always a real figure. And so the costs of actually making sure the gravel's clean and up to date is all it's about, really. It's very simple. It's probably one of the most simplest sports provisions that we could have provided, and it's the cheapest. It really is rock bottom costs for the town. And I hope that as we come clear of COVID, that we can get together with the mayor of the near future, hopefully, who we can do this charity event with. We can get some other organisations involved in it, and we can have some fun days around charity and do some good things. It was only ever built with good intention, and people, when they do get around to going in their garage and digging out that set of balls that they forgot they put there from their last visit to France, get them out, and polish them up, and come out, and well, perhaps at summertime we can all get down there together. I challenge all you Conservative councillors, come and play a game of balls with me.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins.
This summer.
I must say, this is
have you there, and don't say no to me. And I say that to my Labour group as well.
All right. Thank you, Councillor. I must say, as it is my last meeting, I could probably get away with some things, but I wonder if the press will quote you on that. You need to go to the garage and get those, get them out and polish them. Right.
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? Where is this Petang place?
Okay, well, if you'd like to pose that question to Councillor Mullins very briefly, and then we can move to Councillor Purdy.
Chris Mullins, where is it?
It's at West Green, right next to the bowling club in West Green. And can I say that the bowling club welcomed it? In fact, I went into my garage and got my dusty set of balls out, and I gave them a set. So they have a set there. And what they said to me was, when they're doing proper bowling competitions, there's gaps when players need to do something, and they're going to go out there and play boulet on the pitch. It will be used. It's a nice, exciting thing. Yes, it's Westbury playing fields.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Councillor Peter Lamb, the leader of the council. At the cabinet meeting of the 10th of March, Councillor Mullins, the council member for Wellbeing, expressed the view, and I quote, that any future housing development in Crawley could be council housing. I think we really have got enough private housing in the town, and we should be able to concentrate on council housing. I and my fellow members of the Conservative group feel that the future housing in our, albeit very crowded town, must be a broad mix of house types and tenures, and that we should not be sending the message to our aspirational residents that if you want to own your own home, you need to move out of Crawley. Is the leader of the council in agreement with his fellow cabinet member? And if he is, how does he propose that all future houses will be council houses? And if he is, how does he propose to circumnavigate the planning laws to achieve this? Thank you.
So is the camera going to go live at some point?
Councillor Lamb.
Excuse me, can I? Councillor Pickett, can I need some members to turn the cameras off. We cannot send live. There's too many of you are on. We've got a list of you, please. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, you can do whatever you can around planning and around prep work and around getting things in line. But when it comes to elections, having an opposition that's willing to go into it contesting a very popular policy is something that is incredibly good news for us. And I'm delighted to hear Councillor Purdy's remarks. Affordable housing is one of the biggest challenges that we face as a local authority. When this town was built, the majority of the housing here was council housing, the vast majority of it. Now, to try and claim that at this point in time there's a shortage of private housing is to ignore the fact that the vast majority of that's been sold off. And in the process, because it was sold undervalued compared to what it actually is worth, the public sector lost in Crawley alone over £1/3 of £1 billion worth of assets. And now we find ourselves as a local authority struggling with a list of over 2,000 people. And even to get on that list, you've got to be incredibly desperate. The vast majority of people who really should be on that list will never get on because there's not remotely enough affordable housing in the town to do it. It's going to take a very, very long time to clear, and trying to maximise the amount of affordable housing is not only an ongoing duty that we have, stretching back to the fact that for a very long time none of that housing was built when it should have been. For decades it should have been, to catch up with what was lost. But the reality now that with so many people on furlough, effectively already unemployed, just waiting for that furlough time to end, and the knock-on effect in terms of housing, well, we already know when the eviction ban ends, we're going to be swamped with people who are desperate need for somewhere where they can actually afford to live. With that decline in people's incomes, with the continuing pressure out of London, and let's bear in mind private housing can be taken on by anyone. Council housing has to go with someone already living here with a long established local connection, that all it does is build future problems for the people of this town. And I'd far more reasonably wants to ensure that any housing that is being developed is going to the people who need it and who can actually afford it, rather than building out enormous places. There are many, many, many private homes already available in the area if that's what people want. What people write to me about is the lack of affordable housing day in, day out. And I'm delighted to hear that apparently the council's efforts continue to be thwarted by the Conservative group wanting to build more aspirational housing. 7 years ago when we had the local plan going through, we had this exact same fight around trying to get 40% affordable housing and maintained then. And despite the enormous success we've had in delivering affordable housing over the period since, apparently that's not something that we need to be taking concern of, despite the fact that's the vast majority of residents' concerns, if not for themselves, then for their children and their grandchildren, is to get an affordable place to live. So I think Councillor Mullins was speaking on behalf of the great majority of people in this town in wanting to once again be able to afford housing at a reasonable price. And I'm very pleased to hear in an election year the Conservatives decided that's not a policy they agree with.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Did you, excuse me, bear with us a second. Did you want a supplementary, Councillor Purdy, or are you okay to leave it there?
No, I would like a supplemental, please.
Very quickly, please. Thank you.
So Councillor Lamb, whilst I understand much of what your answer was about, and I have my views on that, I don't believe you actually answered the question, which was, do you believe that we should break planning law by only permitting the building of houses in our town?
Neither Councillor Mullins, sorry, is it about to go live? Neither Councillor Mullins nor I believe that. Councillor Mullins was expressing the desire to actually be able to catch up with our housing list and be in a position where we might actually provide people with housing that they can afford in the town, which I can tell you, the huge numbers of people who get in touch with me, including many people I went to school with who are still struggling in shared accommodation in their mid-30s, would desperately love a place. And that was the aspiration he was phrasing. We have done our level best to get the maximum amount of affordable housing we can out of current rules. And I think, if your desire is to see fewer of them, then the reality is the planning system is going to make it harder and harder and harder with the changes the government is bringing in anyway to get any affordable housing. We really are retreating back into the slum conditions, which resulted in this town being built in the first place to try and help people escape from them. And it's incredibly tragic.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And certainly I'd be willing to challenge Councillor Mullins to a game of petanque, and who knows, I could be competitive, but I don't think I could ever be competitive with him in a waffling contest, given the length of his answer to Councillor Burgess. And Councillor Lamb does seem to be sort of misrepresenting Conservative policy on housing somewhat. My question is to the leader. Last month we passed the budget, and that was his 7th budget, excuse me, as leader, although it was a combined budget. So since he's been leader of the council, there have been 6 what you could call entire Labour budgets, and the first one in 2015 was a council tax freeze, and then the subsequent 5 have all been around the 2.5% mark, which has pretty much been the maximum amount that's been allowed under the government legislation, taking us up to pretty much £5 increase per time, and I have no issue or problem with that at all. However, over that same period, inflation has been nearly in all of those years lower than the amount of council tax rise that this authority has imposed. So, for example, in 2015, inflation was 0.37%, so it was slightly higher than the freeze. Then it was 1% the year after, 2.5% in 2017, 2.3% in 2018, 1.74% in 2019, and 0.77% last year in 2020. And today we've had a new inflation figure of last month of 0.4%. So you may ask, what is my interest in council tax rises and inflation rises over the last few years? Well, I, along with many people in Crawley, have seen on our Facebook feeds a claim from the Crawley Labour Party that under Labour, this council has actually delivered an 11.2% council tax reduction in real terms compared to inflation, although the actual post also doubles the amount of inflation since November 2012 when Katie Bourne became Police and Crime Commissioner. It's actually about 13%, not 25%. So could the leader confirm what have been the council tax rises compared to inflation over the time that he's been setting the budget, and does he agree with me that the Facebook post that I mentioned is entirely misleading and inaccurate? Thank you.
Councillor Lamb.
Well, I don't have the inflation figures to hand. I can say that inflation figures the Labour Party has used elsewhere were sourced from the Bank of England's own inflation calculator. So he may well disagree with it, but he's disagreeing with the Bank of England. In terms of this council's council tax increase, I'd say starters that our percentages tend to be far lower than districts in the area other than Crawley Borough Council in general. But I think we've pretty consistently been the lowest in terms of any increase in district level percentage increases in our local area. And certainly when compared to the other authorities, that vast majority of our council tax bill is taken up by 78% by the West Sussex County Council and another 11% by the Police and Crime Commissioner. When you look at what's happened to their increases over that period of time, you quite quickly get the feeling for who's putting up the most amount of people's council tax bills and who isn't. And you may well be able to justify that for one reason or another. But when residents open up that bill, all too often their assumption is that it's Crawley Borough Council that's been putting it up. Whereas we very well know that about £71 worth of people's bills this year are coming from the County Council, another £15 from the Police and Crime Commission. The Police and Crime Commission, I found utterly remarkable, because I remember reading their medium-term financial strategy, and they said a 5% increase was all that was necessary this year to deliver the best quality policing that this area needed. And then the moment the government said they could put up by 15, apparently 15 was the amount that they actually needed. And that wasn't justified by the COVID figures, because the total cost in terms of their COVID figures was about a third of the annual increase they'll be getting as a result of putting up by 15%. So when people compare which party is running which and how much they're putting up by, they have one Labour council, 2 Conservative councils, well, one Labour minority, one we've cooperated this year, and 2 Conservative councils to compare it by. And they can see very clearly from the percentages over the period of time that I've been leader, who's been putting up the most into percentage terms.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Crowe, you want to come back very briefly?
Well, it's not for you to, I wouldn't say it's to determine how brief I am, Mr. Mayor, but I do wish to ask a supplementary question. And while I don't dispute that the County Council and the Police and Crime Commissioner have increased their council taxes by more, it is, of course, they've all done it by the maximum amount that they have been allowed to under this Conservative government under recent years. Would the leader be able to provide me with the inflation figures that he is using for such a claim from the Bank of England? Because he must be suggesting that inflation has been over 2.5% for most of the last few years, which I very much hope that this council has not been using inaccurate inflation figures, because I think everybody knows that inflation has not been more than 2.5% for each of the last few years. So some information on inflation figures and how that relates to council tax rises would indeed be very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Crone. I've been advised that it is in order for me to ask for people to be brief, as we have lots of questions being asked. So it wasn't meant to censure you. More. My
apologies, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I mean, to be honest, part of the discussions around the council tax, we're not putting it up by the maximum we're able to. We can argue about how much it was under what we're able to, but it was pretty consistently not claiming the most amount that we were permitted to by the government. Certainly over the same period of time, of course, we've seen our income cut drastically by central government, which has forced most of those changes. I'll point him in the right direction. It's a hyperlink, where he can go check this out for himself. But I think he's underestimating the impact of compound inflation over the period of time that Katie Bourne has been in office, which as a result produces a far more significant number than just through sort of adding it all up.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Jaggard.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm on now. I didn't know it was me next. I was a bit unprepared. This is a question to Councillor Jahans, please. I understand that the aim of the licensing fees and charging scheme is for it to be self-funding. That is, just to cover the costs of the administration. And for most licences, horse riding establishments, animal boarding, kennels, tattoo parlours, this is in fact the case. At the last licensing meeting, we were told that Crawley Borough Council, that is Crawley council taxpayers, are subsidising one type of licensing business by over £5,000 in 2017, which was then increased pre-COVID to £25,000 for the year 2019. And it is now, in 2021, heading towards £55,000 for a business sector which is still able to trade during the lockdown. This is a subsidy of council taxpayers' money. What are you doing to address this? Is the aim for the licence all licence applications to be self-funding? And if so, how are you going to achieve it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jaggard. Councillor Jahans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's quite a lot to unpack in that question, Councillor Jaggard, but thank you for that. Yes, you're completely right. In the last licensing committee, the committee did vote to increase the licensing fees by the 2% available. On some of those technicalities around the subsidies of costs, if I can, I don't have any of those figures and those details to hand, but I can certainly write and answer a question via email, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Jahans. Councillor Jaggard.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, I mean, I know the figures and behind it, but I wondered how we were going to address this subsidy that currently the one business has.
There's something that I can certainly look into and get back to you on. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I was further down the list than that. Yeah, my question is to the Cabinet Member for Public Protection and Community Engagement. The leader of the Conservative group is to be commended for devoting the whole of his column in the Crawley Observer this week to the critical issue of women's safety, both in the home and on our streets, and the importance of urgent and robust action by central government. With that in mind, can the Cabinet Member for Public Protection please tell the women and girls of Crawley what action she's now taking locally to guarantee their safety and protection, both night and day, as they go about their daily lives in and around our town?
Here I am.
Councillor Brenda Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't claim to be taking any personal action whatsoever to ensure that people in the town, particularly women, are safe. I think we have to rely on the good offices of the police at this time, and that they are doing the job that we expect from them. I'm not quite sure what Councillor Sudan would want me to say, but I don't believe that it's a personal responsibility of mine, but I'm quite content at this time with the actions that are being taken to protect women and girls, and men also. I think it's comprehensive guidance and support we are receiving.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Pendleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Councillor Mullins. I'm crossing my fingers and everything that finally we are about to start getting back to normal. My question is about the community centres. Obviously, the council's lost a lot of income from those having to be closed for the majority of the last 12 months. What is the plan now? What is your plan to actually make sure that people start using them again and we start making that money back?
Councillor Mullins.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, clearly, it's, you know, be honest, within my portfolio, it's much wider than community centres, because the whole of my portfolio has been virtually closed down for a year in one way or another, including all the 44 football fields and everything. So community centres are only a part of the problem, really. We have major problems, and those problems are that we've got to get back to normal when the government allows us to do so. Now, I do respect the government's position because it's one of safety, and you cannot knock rules that are there to protect people, and I support those rules. We cannot simply start booking community centres again, which are, I suppose, relatively small areas over the town, where maybe 50 or 100 people would go in and be together having parties or meetings or whatever they're doing. It's a real problem, and it's been a problem. The Hall Theatre's been closed for the best part of a year. That's a real problem. The K2's been closed. It's all part of the same COVID problem, really. What we will do when we get the licence to open again, when we're told by the government we can get back to normal, is that the community centres will be there, and we can send publicity out, and people will, I think they'll be quite busy because people will want to catch up on things that they missed out on. There's lots of people who've got married, for example, in the past year that haven't had a celebration with their families because they haven't been allowed to. There might even be some wakes to be taking place where people want to get together and remember somebody who departed during the year. There's lots and lots of scope in the future for the community centres, but they're only part of the whole COVID problem. They're not separated from it. The reason we've closed them, or had to close them, is the same as we've closed K2, the Horf, we closed everything else down. That's the same issue, really. And I want to see the back of it as much as you do, I promise you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. That is the 30 minutes that we had allotted for questions. So we now need to move on to item 10, receiving the minutes of the Cabinet Overview and Scrutiny Commission and Committees. I call upon the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Malik, to move the receipt of the reports of the meetings as set out in Agenda Item 6 on page 37 and in the associated supplementary agenda. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the reports of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, Audit, Planning, Licensing, Governance Committees and Cabinet be received. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
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 Okay.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you. Reserved items. We have one item reserved for debate, which is from Cabinet 10th of March 2021, minute 7 on page 68. Proposed extension of air quality management area. Councillor Jahans, as the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Sustainability, will have the final speaking rights on this discussion. This item has been reserved by the Conservative Group. Councillor Purdy to speak first. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I shall be brief. The Hazelwick Air Quality Management Area was declared in 2015 to satisfy the requirements of the Environment Act 1995. This was a piece of green legislation passed by a Conservative government to ensure that local authorities actively monitored air quality and took action to mitigate unacceptable levels of particulate matter and other airborne pollutants. It is, of course, disappointing to see that the area at risk covered by the Air Quality Management Area is not being reduced, but unfortunately needs to be extended down to Three Bridges Station and outwards to encompass parts of New Street, Mill Road, Hazelwick Road and Three Bridges Road. Investigating the extension of the Hazelwick AQMA on this basis was one of the many recommendations from the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel led by my fellow Conservative councillor, Kim Jaggard-Maidenbauer. I therefore welcome the administrative decision to extend the Hazelwick AQMA rather than declaring a UK AQMA as the council had the option to do. A single management area should enable a holistic air quality action plan to be implemented in a coordinated manner. Now we want to see the implementation of that action plan accelerated and tangible improvements to air quality brought to residents in Three Bridges and the other neighbourhoods. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. May I now please bring in Councillor Bob Burgess to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am pleased to see that the air quality management area is going to be extended because clearly there's a need for it. However, I do have concerns. I noticed that the original Hazelwick AQMA has been in place since July 2015. That's 5 years, 8 months. And in that time, it seems as though the problem with nitrogen dioxide levels remain. Why? What has been done to try and reduce pollution levels? And what has been done to try and identify the reason for the high pollution levels? Whatever they have done does not seem to have worked. Extending the AQMA is the right thing to do, but there must be appropriate measures in place to drastically reduce the pollution levels in order to ensure the health and well-being of our residents in that area. I believe that the levels need to continue to be monitored and recorded, but this must be alongside the remedial actions that are necessary. Also, those remedial actions need to be reported back, perhaps maybe to the OSC on an annual basis, because what is the point of recording the levels in the first place if nothing's going to be done about them? If all it means is that should the levels increase for any reason, we will have to have an early sight of this. It is not acceptable just to say, oh, the pollution levels have gone up. We need to do something about it. And I would urge that we have what I'm trying to say, we have sight of what is being proposed to try and reduce the nitrogen dioxide levels in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Peter Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't quite sure how this was going. I saw the cameras coming on. I thought they were still being proposed. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I agree broadly with the comments that have been made so far. It is really bad news that not only did we have a air quality management area declared in 2015, but the problem does not seem to have gone down in any way. This, in fact, is a condemnation of the fact that there's no action been taken to do anything about it. And if anything, probably we've seen increases in vehicle traffic. And of course, it's the vehicle traffic that causes this problem. It's a simple fact. We may not like it. We are all attached to our vehicles. We need to use them to get about our daily life. But it's the vehicles that are causing this problem. And of course, the extension is going under the very narrow bottleneck of the bridges at Three Bridges Station. So it's one thing to welcome and support the air quality management area and the extension, which I do, but it's quite another thing to actually bite the bullet and come up with and implement successfully the solutions. And of course, one of the major solutions has to be to encourage people to modal shift, to change their choice of travel, which is why in the local, in the Crawley growth programme, which is a partnership between ourselves, the Coastal Capital Let and West Sussex, who are also, of course, the Highways Authority for this area, we have several proposals to improve alternatives for people to travel through this area, and particularly to encourage people to walk to the station, to get the bus, or to cycle. So, for example, West Sussex have already implemented a spanking new cycle path that accesses the whole of Pound Hill north and south and gives a direct path down to the station and to Liddell and to Iceland, except for it stops when it gets to Billington Drive. So the next piece needs to be put in. So there are some things being done in partnership with County Council, and what we need to do is more of those. And we need to do things like when the temporary bus lane was in, we need to behave like adults and act responsibly about the necessity to have a bus lane so that we can reduce the traffic, the vehicle traffic, and encourage people to get the bus to the station. So instead of getting picked up by a car, maybe you can get the bus home. But whatever we do, and there are other things we should do, we need to do it in partnership with West Sussex, and this Labour-led authority was the first council to sign a growth deal with the county council. Peter Lamb signed that with Louise Goldsmith. You may remember her, some of you I know don't want to acknowledge her anymore. We have led the way in bringing forward these proposals, and we are doing our damnedest to improve the air quality by actually taking some action instead of beating our chest saying, oh, it's all awful, it's just getting worse and somebody's got to do something about it. Well, we in the visionary and ambitious Labour administration are prepared to take some action to do something about that, to help people to get the bus to Manor Royal when they get off the train instead of getting picked up by cars, etc. So yes, I think we're all in agreement here. We have got to take action, and I look forward to support from all the speakers for the actions that we're proposing to take in the Crawley Growth Programme, and indeed the expanded plans we have covered under the Town Deal Board, where we've got further proposals coming forward to further enhance the station, enhance modal shift opportunities for people. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Burrett.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As one of the ward councillors for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood, I would certainly like to welcome this report and the extension of the AQMA boundary. Obviously, as those who've read the report and have looked at the map in detail will see that it has been extended to include an extra part of my own ward, as well as a larger part of Three Bridges, basically encompassing the area around Three Bridges Station and the interchange there under the bridge, which obviously is a very heavily congested area. So I do concur with the points that were made by Councillor Purdy and Councillor Burgess earlier. I have to say, I also have concerns about the fact that we have had an air quality management area in Three Bridges for over 5 years now. And actually, sadly, when we saw the report at the OSC and the Cabinet, what we were told was that actually that hasn't improved the situation and things have got worse. And now we need to extend it. And, you know, I hear what Councillor Smith says. I mean, I acknowledge what has been done, but I'm sorry that he had to politicise the matter, because at the end of the day we're all trying to work together on this. And actually he's talking about, well, it's a Labour-led council that's done this and so on. It's actually that same Labour-led council that's presided over the AQMA for the last 5 years, which we've now been told has improved things. So, you know, I think we need to be a bit careful when we get political on that, because that's not what it's meant to be about. But I do have concerns about, obviously, the traffic throughput. We all know what a major interchange that is under the bridge and in the roads leading off of it. And I have to say, some people are not going to like this, but, you know, I have to tie this in to what is going to be happening in the future, and particularly the redevelopment scheme at the front of the station, which, as you know, like others, I support, but I have concerns about one particular implication of that, which is the loss of the right-hand turn out of the station. And just think about it for a moment. You have this traffic which is coming out of the station at the moment and turning right to go to Pound Hill and Maidenbough. And once the improvement scheme is put in place, that same level of traffic will turn left out of the station, go all along the way, all along to the square about, go around the square about, and go all the way back again and back through underneath the bridges to Pound Hill and Maidenbough. So what that means is that all those vehicles which normally would have passed through that area once will be passing through the area twice. And I really struggle to understand how that is going to reduce the level of pollution and deal with the air quality issues within that part of Three Bridges and Pound Hill. To me, it's going to increase it. And actually, unless we bite the bullet on that, we are going to be coming back here in 5 years' time for another extension and being told actually things have got worse. There's been no improvement since 2021. I hope that happen, but I fear that it will if we go ahead with something that is actually going to increase the through traffic along that stretch of road rather than reduce it. So yes, I do welcome this. I welcome any measure that can be put in place for the people of Three Bridges and Pound Hill to try and improve the air quality and reduce the health problems that causes. But I do think that we need to be very clear that actually it's no good having this in place for another 5 years and then finding that nothing has improved, when actually we're putting in place measures that could, in theory, exacerbate the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burrett. Councillor Brenda Burgess, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with a lot of what my colleagues have said, and particularly Councillor Burrett, and he said about nothing's happened in the 5 years that we've had this in place. It seems that all we're doing is extending it. I welcome an extension, don't get me wrong, because the pollution in that area has been very bad for a long time and will only get worse over the coming years. I mean, I am concerned that we have children, a high proportion of our children use, I call them puffers, you know, I can't think what the proper name is, and for poor breathing, and Crawley appears to be one of the highest areas of the southeast where the children are affected in this way. I'm only hoping that this in this extension of the air pollution checking will help us to monitor and really do something and start thinking outside the box. We don't want to take another 5 years to come back and say in 5 years' time, oh, we've got to extend it again because the pollution's going up even more. Let's monitor, let's act on the results. Let's start thinking outside the box and be radical, and let's start doing it now so that we can improve the air quality as of now, because it needs doing. And well, otherwise I welcome the proposition wholeheartedly, and I think we're going to have more across Crawley because the air in Crawley as a whole is deteriorating. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Lamb, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's not a mystery what causes poor quality air. I mean, it's vehicles. You know, we know that it's vehicles that cause the problem. We also know that the greatest problems are caused when vehicles are static. It results in far more emissions being concentrated in a single area. So the simplest things we can do, try to avoid there being high levels of air contaminants, is to have fewer vehicles on the road and have them moving out of areas as fast as possible. Now, the problem about this is that so far, the only two discussions we've had about transport around Three Bridges Station has been that you shouldn't have a bike lane there because it gets in the way of vehicle movements, and that we shouldn't get rid of the right-hand turn. Now, the problem with the right-hand turn that people always forget is you're not just stopping traffic moving inwards towards town. Every time that right-hand turn is active, you're holding up traffic moving both ways along Hazlitt Avenue. And the end result is you maximise the number of static vehicles for a single point in time. So the number one thing you could do to improve air quality in that area is to take out the right-hand turn, because you'd have the fastest level of movement through the area. And that's what all the studies, that not our studies, that West Sussex County Council has done, show that you get the most amount of vehicle movements through that area by getting rid of the right-hand turn, because it holds up so much of the traffic moving around that area. So if people are honest about this and really want to do something about this, that means you've got to forget about the angry letters that you will inevitably get when any of this stuff happens, and instead look at the data and say, does this data show that this is the best way of improving people's air quality? Because otherwise, you will see more children with inhalers. The only solution we've got to this is to get the contaminants out of the air. And the only way of doing that is by reducing the vehicle movements and by keeping them moving as much as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I just begin by saying that in general, air quality across Crawley is mainly good, and actually the long-term trend of nitrogen dioxide pollutants is actually going down. But I am glad members do welcome the extension of the AQMA. As Councillor Purdy said at the beginning, it does tie directly into our climate emergency work, which was chaired by Councillor Jaggard, and is reflective of one of the recommendations from their report from the scrutiny panel. It is unfortunate, though, that we have to extend it, but it does show that we're taking action on this and shows that we're serious about tackling the climate emergency, but also demonstrates that we're serious about improving the air quality of our residents. Having said that, I do share members' frustrations that we're at this stage and we haven't seen improvements over the current AQMA. And I appreciate everybody does understand the reasons why that is. It is a very difficult one to tackle. As Councillor Burrett, I believe, mentioned about how the vicinity, it's a main route in and out of the M23 and Manor Royal. So it is quite a difficult one to tackle. But by extending this current one, it does allow us to take a coordinated approach and address air quality issues in a holistic manner. Councillor Purdy mentioned this in his remarks as well. But coming to the solutions around this, how do we tackle this issue where there's movements of traffic and where there's congestion and pollutants from engines? When I've discussed this with various people, one thing keeps cropping up, and that's around cleaner engine technology. And I'd like to say that I'm really pleased that we are working with the County Council on an electric vehicle charging network to try and increase that take up of electric vehicles. So that's part of it. I know West Sussex are also looking at signalising and smoothing that stop-start nature around the area and some traffic management schemes. But one thing which is absolutely key is something Councillor Smith mentioned, and that is about modal shift. We have been working on the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan to try and encourage more sustainable and active travel. Members will be interested to know that actually during the first lockdown, everybody knows traffic volumes fell significantly. I've seen some stats that it was over 60% in Crawley. And because of that absence in traffic activity, there was actually an average of about a 40% reduction in nitrogen dioxide levels across the borough. So that just goes to show how important it is to reduce those levels and move towards more sustainable and active modes of travel. And the other key component of that is around education and ensuring future generations are educated around the implications of the way they travel and what consequences that has for the environment and for our air quality. Councillor Burgess, both Councillor Burgesses talked about the air quality action plan. This is what will be incredibly important, because that will help us to draw up plans to target the sources of pollution and produce measures to help improve the air quality in the area. I'm hopeful this will be drawn up this year to include this new area, and we will be bringing that back to Cabinet, and hopefully I look forward to a fruitful discussion on that when it is available, and always happy to take members' input to that. My email address is, everybody has it, so please do feel free to shoot me an email around that. But I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. There are no supplementary items of business, but before we close the meeting, I do need to wish those who are not standing at the next election good luck, and to thank them for their service to Crawley, and also wish good luck to everybody standing in the upcoming election. This is the last meeting for me, so thank you all for your friendship and robust debate, which is always good for everybody. It's a learning. Certainly, I come out of this experience with the corners knocked off me. But it's been a fabulous 6 years. Thank you to everyone who has, like I say, served the town and is not standing in the next election. Good luck to everybody. And with that, I declare this meeting of the full council closed. Thank you.